I see my GS coming southbound towards this guy in the parking lot, and I remember just thinking this guy's just gonna take her out, and he's pedals buried, and everything's going sideways in like seconds, and he does not he does not hit Tim, does not hit Michelle, and there is an embankment that goes up to a street. This guy literally just buries his Cadillac into this embankment that's probably as tall as this from this deck, a 15-foot embankment, and somehow manages to get this car up and over the embankment up to the street.
Okay, so for the audience, I'm up here in God's country in Sandpoint, Idaho. We're going to talk to a guy that I think is going to have some very interesting perspective on things. So let's get into it. So, can you introduce yourself for me, please?
My name's Derek Kinninger.
And Derek, who did you work for?
I worked for DEA.
Okay, for how many years?
I worked for him for 28 years.
Okay, so 28 years. So, can you give me a little bit of background about yourself? Where did you grow up? Tell me a little bit about your family life. And was there anything growing up that led you into law enforcement?
I'm a native San Diegan, born and raised. I that included my entire career with DEA I spent in San Diego. I was one of three children. I have a younger brother and an older sister. Um, my family, pretty much parents and all that upper generation, to include my generation, everybody went to Catholic school. So I spent my entire life from kindergarten to graduated from high school in Catholic school, but all my friends in my neighborhood went to public school. So I had a sampling of both sides of that. Um,
Were you a good student?
um, I was a decent student. I guess I was torn between, in my family, um, things were tight. So we were basically, if you needed money and you wanted anything, you were going to have to make that money. And so at a pretty young age, we all, my siblings and I and cousins, and we got jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So I started out like a lot of people being a paper boy. And so I was in grade school and got my first paper route in like fourth or fifth grade. And then I got, ended up stepping up to a morning route with the San Diego Union. So, I was up at 4:30 every morning, 7 days
At
a
what
week.
age?
Sixth grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the start of, I would honestly say, uh, work affecting my scholastic side.
Okay.
So I did fine in school. I didn't do as well as I could have because I was running the candle at both ends and tired a lot.
Yeah.
I was tired.
How about sports? Did you do any sports?
Couldn't do sports.
Too busy.
I didn't have time.
Okay.
I didn't have time. Um, I the only time growing up I did not have a job was when I started high school in ninth grade. So I had my paper out all through grade school, through graduation, and then just prior to starting high school, I quit my paper route. So most of ninth grade I didn't have a job, but I did want a car, and that was the reason I actually got my paper route. So I was planning at a young age, I was going to have to save money to get a car when I turned 16. So um, I did, I managed to accomplish that. I got a job. Um, it was a job posting actually at my high school. Um, my high school was across from USD. It was a co-ed Catholic high school, and it was on a job board, and I got a job at a gas station, and this was a 3 pump mom and pop little gas station in San Diego, in kind of South College area, and I started working at Frank's Texaco, and I had just bought my first car, and it needed all kinds of work. So I was forced then to learn how to work on cars because I didn't have the money to pay anybody to work on my car. And so that started a phase in my life where I was in and around cars.
Okay.
While working at Frank's Texaco, my next door neighbor, my best friend growing up, he was working at the San Diego Zoo, and he said, "Hey, this is a Teamster job, and so the pay's a little bit better. You got to pay union dues." So I was working 7 days a week. I was working during the week at Frank's Texaco, and I was working on the weekends at the zoo. And I was doing that, and my same best friend, his dad was a doctor, and his parents owned a Mercedes. Well, they ended up having an independent German guy that worked on their cars, and Dr. Woodard knew that I had a little bit of mechanical skill set, and during a conversation he had with Dieter, Dieter was looking for a helper. So I got approached, "Would you be interested in working for me?" So I said, "Sure." I thought, which was obviously at, I'm in 10th grade in high school. I thought, wow, this is great. So I started working for Dieter, and he encouraged me right away to quit my other jobs. He didn't want to be competing with my time. So I think he probably offered me 25 cents or 50 cents more an hour. And I, I did that and worked for him all the way through freshman, almost sophomore in college. I went to San Diego State. So um, again, I was working way too much. It was affecting school. I remember having a conversation with my mom about quitting school, and she encouraged me to stay in school.
Yeah.
So
What was there something? What were you studying in college?
I was general ed at that time.
Okay.
With I don't remember. We did technically have to declare a major, but it wasn't like it is now. And it might have been like engineering, but I was doing all general ed. I wasn't doing up any upper
Okay.
work. So I ended up quitting Dieter and changed everything with school, and I really focused on school. So my grades, my first 2 years and my last 2.5 ish plus, totally different. Focused on school, focused on studying. I still worked, but I had jobs that I didn't care about. They were just a means to an end job.
So was your mom always kind of focused on education then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, a lot of sacrifice to send your kids to Catholic school.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially for, you guys didn't have a whole bunch of money, right?
No, my dad had his own business growing up, and that went south, and he had to do a complete career change when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So
What was it? Was there something growing up that ultimately led you to law enforcement?
my mom's younger brother actually was a reservist with San Diego PD, and I did look up to him a lot, but
Do you want to talk about that at all? And
well, he passed away when I was in high school.
okay.
So he died young. He was in his 20s.
Okay. All right.
Um, I did it. I had a very just a perchance encounter that pretty much changed everything for me. So I'm at this point. I'm at San Diego State and I'm finishing my general ed. Um, and it was right at that cusp where I'm about ready to stop working for Dieter, and this girl uh, I knew her through some of my buddies. She lived in Mission Hills, and I'm talking to her. Run into her on campus, and I'm talking to her, and she tells me she's a criminal justice major. So we're talking back and forth. She goes, "Hey, you should take a class. Really like it. I think you'd like it."
Mm.
So I'm just about ready to transition from general ed into, you know, a major.
Yeah.
And I took a criminal justice class, and it was it. I was sold. I mean,
What was it? What was
I
it?
don't even remember the class.
No. What they not necessarily at the class, and maybe you just don't even remember this, but what was it about that specific law enforcement or criminology or whatever class
Just the
that
whole.
kind of?
I just found it very interesting.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
and it bit me. It just bit me, and changed my major. Boom, I'm all in.
Mm.
I mean, it was a light switch.
So you're all in. What is it? Is there a goal at this point?
There is not a goal at this point.
Okay.
So, other than my uncle, I didn't know a single person in law enforcement.
Okay.
I had nobody to really talk to or get guidance or anything from.
Okay.
Um,
Real briefly, tell me how you get your job with Department of Alcohol and Beverage Control.
oh, yeah, we actually didn't cover that.
Okay.
So, I'm in this interview.
Yeah, but how do you? Okay, so you graduate from college, but how do you get that job?
Because I had taken that written statewide investigator
Okay.
exam.
Okay.
So basically, any state agency that had an investigative position could pull potentially candidates off that written exam and request a interview.
Okay.
And it was very diverse,
Okay.
the agencies out there. I had an interview. This was and it was with like state departments of weights and measures. And I remember walking into this interview with these two guys wearing their like cheesy short sleeve button up, Kmart shirt with their cheap slacks and a tie on, and trying to convince me that this was like the interesting job. And I remember just sitting there and listening to these two guys going, not only no, but hell no. Hell no. So when this interview pops with ABC, they're basically telling me about the job during this interview. They're selling me on this job, and I'm like, hey, this sounds pretty cool, right? And obviously the pay was a consideration, and I basically threw it out. I mean, I got the bird in the hand. I got this offer with the Border Patrol.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so how's this process work? What's the time frame? I mean, I just spent a year and a half post college thinking I was nothing. I'm not passing up on this bird in the hand.
Right.
And they said, hey, just got to get you through a background. It'll take like 3 months. So I'm like, okay. So I drive home, talking to my mom, and she goes, well, you need to tell the Border Patrol, basically come up with a reason why you can't go right now, but tell them you still want it, and have a safety net.
Yeah.
So probably doesn't sound good, but I did draft a letter, because there was no phone comm in that process with the Border Patrol, right?
Right.
And I drafted a letter and just said, hey, I have some uh, personal issues. My grandmother's sick. I cannot attend, this particular academy class with the Border Patrol, but would like to be considered for a future academy class. Fire that baby off. And Meanwhile, ABC's going through the background. Takes them a little bit longer than they said it was going to take, and I'm kind of thinking, right?
Yeah.
But I get the call. Here's your start date. So I move, go up there, get my apartment, and living the life of a single guy in a new city, and kind of involved with my job enough that the border patrol thing kind of went out of my mind.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, months later, I got another one of those little shitty slips in the mail offering you a job, report to this city in Texas. The first one was El Paso. The second one was someplace else in Texas. And I gave it the old no thank you.
Yeah.
So the one plus was there was a plus and a minus to that career path. One, I walked away from some federal time that could have
Yeah.
gone towards my retirement.
Sure.
The plus was when I got hired, my recruiter considered my job title to be that of a detective. And so I came on as a GS9 instead of a 7.
Yeah, that's a good bonus.
So that did pay off.
Yeah.
So in theory, I was one step above some other people coming on the job.
Yeah.
That work experience did work towards my, and I do remember, doing my panel interview with DEA, and them asking about my work and what I did, and I'm sure the fact that I'm already working undercover stuff and working investigations and all that probably worked to my benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had actually become a member of CNOA. And I was attending periodically classes through California Narcotics Officers Association. And I do remember actually going to a training class, and there was 2 DEA agents. And these 2 agents were out of the LA division. And they gave a class, and it was all regarding coke production in South America. And basically, um, their personal opinion was, hey, if you can limit somehow all the ingredients for making any kind of dope, basically you're gonna obviously affect production. You know, so whatever that is, if you can regulate it, it would greatly affect things. Anyways, I was really impressed by that particular class, and um, I through working up in LA, we did also a lot of joint ops with LAPD, LASO, Torrance PD, Long Beach PD, working with their vice units. And I remember at the time thinking, this is more law enforcement work that appealed to me. I wanted to get a little more down and dirty.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm dealing with the recruiter down in San Diego, and finally I'd met my wife. We decided to get married, and I put in for a transfer, and I got transferred down to San Diego with ABC.
Okay.
And I'm down there working, and I remember one night hooked up with San Diego PD Vice. We're working downtown, and this this guy ends up doing a purse snatch on this lady. I'm talking to this vice sergeant. My partner and I. It's probably 1+ o'clock in the morning. People are starting to come out of bars and restaurants and stuff. Anyways, this guy, it's like out of a movie. The low lighting, it's shadowy, and all of a sudden we're having a conversation, and this lady lets out a scream, and you see this guy running, and my partner and I didn't even blink. Boom, we're gone, and we're after this guy, and we're just hauling ass, down some streets, and the guy ended up dodging into like a little alcove to a business, and We jumped him, and you know, the sergeant caught up with us finally, and got the lady's purse back, and you're just like, wow, that was cool,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And we did some other stuff, and each of those experiences, caused me to want a little bit more. So out of the blue, I had pretty much written off that I was ever going to get a call from DEA, because it turned out essentially a hiring freeze came up, and
So you had initially applied. How long had it been before you thought, this isn't going to happen?
I was coming up on 2 years.
2 years.
So there was a pause there when there was
Okay.
a hiring freeze.
Okay.
Fortunately, back then they didn't start over.
Okay.
You just jump back in the queue type thing.
Yeah.
And come to find out, I didn't know at the time, but basically things were different then. But the recruiter basically had a file drawer of all his applicants, and when he got a call from Quantico, hey, San Diego, give us 3 bodies, he could pick anybody out of his file drawer that was ready.
Okay.
So he got to choose
Okay.
who was the next guys. So we bought a house. We're married for 3 months. We go out, we buy a house. I'm like, I'm moving forward, right? Thinking about, what I'm going to do, if I'm going to, maybe join a local law enforcement. And all of a sudden, Gus calls me out of the blue, no heads up. Hey, Derek, this is Gus. I'm offering you a job.
So the same guy that you had met the recruiting thing.
Nope, he was a different recruiter.
Oh, different guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Different recruiter.
So had you been in contact with Gus though through this whole time?
Oh yeah. I mean,
so do you think?
Here's a quote from Gus.
Okay.
He said, "The people that bug me get a job."
There you go.
So I was the guy leaving him a voicemail once a week.
There you go.
I was that guy.
Yeah.
Blowing up his phone. And I'm sure he was on the other end checking his voicemail going, oh my God, here's this guy again, right?
Yeah.
So
but persistence, right? I mean, that's
again, what do you got to lose?
Exactly.
And I'm probably half the time calling from my desk phone at ABC,
Yeah.
So he said, caveat is you got to leave in a week.
Of course.
Of course. And I remember I was so taken aback, and I'd taken on this financial obligation of buying a house. And I'm just thinking back in my mind, what am I going to do if I have to sell my house? We're in the hole on this thing, brand new homeowners. So I said, let me call you tomorrow. And he goes, I need an answer tomorrow. So I came home, and an interesting experience early on when my wife and I were going out was, this is when the whole Kiki Camarena thing went down. Kiki gets whacked. And I remember watching, something came on TV. It wasn't news, but it was more of a movie, something. I don't remember, And my wife's just like, yeah, you're not doing that. And I basically told my wife, I said, hey, I've been working for a long time to get to this. This is what I'm going to do. So I went home, said, hey, got a call from Gus today. He offered me a job. And she goes, yeah, I don't think you should do it. And I said, I'm going for it. So I called him back the next day, and I said, I'm in. So I had to give my agency, and I told him, I go, hey, Gus, I'm not even giving my agency a 2-week notice. And he goes, hey, basically it is what it is.
But how did you work it out with your wife though, who didn't necessarily want you to do it?
Just said, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It was pretty much, yeah.
Huh.
At least I was nice enough to consult her before I gave her the green light, So
yeah.
And she obviously knew. But I did do one thing before I called Gus, is I called the SAC of the B&E office in San Diego, Phil Donahue, and I said, hey, Phil, I said, hey, I just got a job offer with DEA. Where am I with you guys? And he goes, Derek, I just hired 2 SO people. Rhea Babcock and another guy, both that worked down at our office actually eventually, DEA San Diego.
Yeah.
And he goes, but I'd like to get you in on the next class. And he said, take the job and we'll talk.
Huh.
So, and the reason they paid well, but I had, not a lot of experience, but I had this 3 years of state time,
Yeah.
figured what the heck. So,
So just in case I missed something here. So you had applied for B&E. Did you apply for B&E at the same time that you had done DEA, or DEA had taken so long that you were like, I'm
I
going to
can't
apply?
tell you like exactly that they were at the same starting point,
Okay.
but
Okay.
yes, within a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and B&E was much more active, I think, up in LA and Northern California than San Diego, come
Okay.
to find out. And so I end up leaving to go to the academy. I come to the office. Gus says, show up. You're going to have some downtime at the office. And I got put into group one until I was leaving for the academy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Link's brother, Rocky, was a new hire at the time.
Okay.
And Rocky said, well, on my wish list, even though they said pick 3 different locations, I put San Diego division, San Ysidro, and Carlsbad. That's my three choices. And he goes, and I came back.
Wow.
And so that's like in the back of my mind.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you. So
Because I had this house, right?
yeah, you're right. So they're doing the same thing. By the time you're at the academy, they're still saying wish list 3, and they're not,
And they're telling you where all the locations where
right.
they need people.
Right.
And
Did San Diego need people though?
yes, and it was a southern border office, right?
Yeah.
So I just like, if it worked for Rocky, what the hell?
Right.
So I did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And I did a little hardship on the back of my wish list saying, hey, by the way, just got married, just bought this house, put every penny into buying this house. It could be a financial problem for
Yeah.
me if I have to sell it. Figured, again, what the hell?
Right.
I'll throw it out there.
Right.
And myself and another NIS agent put in for San Diego. Well, actually, there was 3 of us initially that got San Diego out of my class. Rich Mebbs and Jill. Can't remember Jill's last name. She was out of Wisconsin. So Jill gets tapped after we got our assignments, and she goes, hey, they said, we're going to give you a career opportunity. How would you like to go up to LA instead of San Diego and work under Lambda? So it was the whole Kiki thing.
Yeah.
Based out of LA.
Yeah.
So she's like, sounds cool. LA, San Diego, what's the diff?
Right.
I'm from Wisconsin. And she goes for it. And I almost thought about like pulling her aside and like, it's different.
Yeah.
Right? I lived up there for 3 years. It's different. Experience, unbelievable. There is so much crime in LA. You're going to get all the experience you want in law enforcement.
Yeah.
That was my takeaway from working up there for 3 years. You can't walk out the back door without stumbling into something.
Yeah.
And so Rich didn't he did not get San Diego. I did, and he was so pissed off he got sent to LA that he ended up quitting and went back to NIS.
Wow.
And the ironic part was he went to LA with NIS. So I don't know what his rationale was, but
Okay,
yeah.
well, let's talk about it. You get out of the academy and you start working in group 1, and basically it's general enforcement.
Yep.
So tell me what kind of cases you're working on.
We had We had Steve Skaggs was working a very long-term, very involved cocaine case that was went from San Diego down to South America up to LA. Very complex. Link's brother Rocky was working with Steve Skaggs on that case, but he was more at the tail end of that investigation. So that was a big case going on in our group. Um, we ended up having one of the senior guys I worked with did a wiretap, and it was a big deal back then because we had no facility for a wiretap. We had no apparatus for doing a wiretap. It was an unbelievable thing to do. You know, from renting, literally, he rented a office in a business park down the street, like within two businesses. So we had a base area to work out of to set up the wiretap, and everything was brought in. Nothing like,
Yeah.
you know, what
But
it is now.
but were there cases that you gravitated to that you liked more than others?
Just loved being on the street. Loved being on the street.
So as long as you were on the street, you were
Yes.
happy.
That's all I cared about. And it didn't matter if we were doing surveillance, doing by walks. I remember my first experience. Rocky had the Chevy pickup with a shell on it, and one of the senior guys, Chuck Jones, in the group, he had this coke case with this Mexican he had targeted, and the guy was out of the L.A. area, but Chuck was sucking him down into San Diego to do the case, and I think San Clemente is kind of the county line.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get him across that line, he's good to go for prosecution in San Diego. So Chuck had been working this case for a while, and I'm fresh on the job. And they stick Rocky and I in the back of Rocky's truck with the Kel unit, and we're recording and monitoring the Kel because it's tea time. And this guy shows up, and he's got 10 keys of coke. And I remember Chuck saying, make sure you hit the off button on the Kel unit when it's time. Guess what didn't happen? We freaking bail out of the back of the truck, and it's bum rush to this guy,
Yeah.
hook him up, and I'm like, wow, 10 keys of coke? This is like a walk in the park. I'm thinking in my mind, right now.
Yeah.
But I wasn't there for all the lead up to it, all the meetings and the calls and on and on. But it was, I was 110% in at this point, thinking this is just great, right?
So you and I talked about this before we started recording. I different experience that you had than other people I had talked to. It was kind of you get thrown into the deep end. Nobody's really holding your hand and teaching you how to do things.
No.
What do you think that was all about? I mean, you obviously said the older guys were helpful if you asked a question,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't like guiding you around like
No.
field training officer or field training agent.
It was kind of a sink or swim attitude.
Hmm.
If you want to make something out of this, it's on you.
Yeah.
And so, you pick the people that maybe you looked up to and maybe gravitated towards asking them questions or guidance or whatever the case may be. I got thrown this informant, Jorge, one of the senior guys in my group had done him, but he was a low ender in his case, and Jorge was in custody at MCC, and finally, after uh, being incarcerated, going through the whole prosecution phase, he had the epiphany and said, "I want to work." And don't ask me how Chuck managed to pull this off, but Chuck got him out of custody, out of federal custody, and told the judge he will report to me directly. So, not a PO. And he said, "Derek, you want to work this guy?" And sure. So I I worked with Jorge for a while. On the scale of informants, he was a good informant. He was easy to work with, um, and he ended up going from basically a defendant informant to a paid informant, and worked out of our office, not only for me, but I would turn him on to other people, and worked for quite a number of years for us.
Wow.
But I remember my first case, and I don't remember exactly why, but there was another pass around informant that was used in our group, and we ended up pairing Jorge and Ramon together on this case, and it was right on the National City San Diego border, and Chipino shoes, and it was this old Mexican guy. He had a shoe shop in a little strip mall, probably 6 storefronts, and his storefront was the end, and we ended up putting together this 3 pound meth deal, and it was your typical dope case where it couldn't be more of a cluster dealing with these people. And we're up, we're down, we're up, we're down, we're up, we're down. And, you're so frustrated, so frustrated. And I remember getting a call from Jorge and Ramon, and they're like, hey, we're up. Got a call from this guy. So this guy that owned, this older Mexican guy that owned Chipino shoes, he had this flunky working for him. Well, it turns out that's the guy he had made arrangements to deliver this dope to us. So scramble everybody together. We're back up. This had been going on for probably close to a week. And you're losing face with all your coworkers, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And I ended up in a car with my partner. He's driving, and I'm passenger. And T pulls into the parking lot of this strip mall, and we go down in front of this business, and here's this uh, Cadillac Fleetwood, one of the old enormous Cadillacs, backed into the front of this storefront. And here's this Mexican guy sitting there, and he looks at us, and you can just see the wheels turning. This guy puts the car in gear, hauls ass out of this spot he's in, and he's running northbound in front of all these businesses. And I see another guy in my group come up over uh, the curb, a essentially a landscape median. I see my GS coming southbound towards this guy in the parking lot, and I remember just thinking, this guy's just gonna take her out, and he's pedals buried, and everything's going sideways in like seconds, and he does not he does not hit Tim, does not hit Michelle, and there is an embankment that goes up to a street. This guy literally just buries his Cadillac into this embankment that's probably as tall as this from this deck, a 15-foot embankment, and somehow manages to get this car up and over the embankment up to the street. Okay. Meanwhile, there's an AD that goes off. So you hear a round go off. And of course, your wheels are turning. Somebody just got dumped. Was it one of us? Was it one of them? And he makes it up onto this street, blows out 2 of his tires. And fortunately, by the grace of God, he decides to go right and not left out into another major street. And he ends up stuffing this Cadillac, into a parking spot, but takes out 2 cars while he's going in, crashes, and we bagged him. This guy ends up in the hospital, and literally he tests positive for every dope under the sun is in his system and his blood workup. And my SAC ended up having to do a press release because of how everything went down. One of the ladies in this apartment complex, it was her car that got totaled essentially, and yeah, and so that was my first experience, right? And you're just like, wow. So
Okay, so from group one, you end up into a group
task force team,
task force.
yes.
Okay, is that the one where you're targeting? No, that's not. Is that the one you're targeting the Ariana Felix
No,
group?
so basically, group one, I'm in group one,
Okay.
and our group is decided by management. Hey, group one is going to go off site to an off site location, be co housed with the FBI, and they're
Okay.
going to be working this Ariana Felix case 100% full time.
Okay.
Because of that, there was a shift in manpower. And like I said, myself and Rocky being the two youngest rookies on the team, they said, hey, kick those guys out. We have enough, or we're
How much time did you actually spend working on that Ariana Phoenix? Not much.
not much at all.
Okay. Let me ask you this though. You get essentially you get housed before you leave for the task force. You get housed and you're kind of
I actually, we were still on site at that location
okay.
when I got transferred.
Okay, so you didn't have any interaction with the FBI then.
No,
Okay.
I had one experience with them.
Well, I'm just the only reason I ask is I'm going back to the story you told about the recruiter with the
Yeah,
FBI,
yeah.
and you're like absolutely not. And I was just wondering if you had any interaction with them, and did that ever change over the years?
I had another experience, and it coincided in part with that recruiter, or with that class at San Diego State.
Really?
Yes.
Well, okay, what was that?
So I'm at work, I'm the rookie guy.
Yeah.
So you're getting thrown here, you're getting thrown
Yeah.
there. Michelle says, "Hey, Derek, I need you to tomorrow morning. The Phoebes are going to be hitting a house in Ocean Beach. I need you to meet at this location. There's going to be a briefing. They need help. I have no idea, zero background, don't know what their case is about, nothing. We're kicking a door, right? Or so I think we're kicking a door. Okay. So show up for this briefing. I'm the only guy from DEA/Group One. Okay. Meet with these Phoebes. We have a briefing. House is like whatever, 4 blocks away. It's a little like 2 bedroom, 1 bath house in Ocean Beach. So we roll up on this house. We're in our G ride, so I'm not in a raid van, and hop out of the car. I'm suited up, got my vest on, guns out. I look around, nobody's got their guns out. I'm like, we're hitting this house. I'm thinking to myself, we're hitting this house. You guys good to go on this? So they go up, do a soft knock, and I'm like, I'm back. I'm more on the edge of the front lawn. I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? This is not how we take care of business. So, guy comes to the door. It's their target. And I see this, kind of shake the hand. Hey, we'd like to come in. Is this? And so it's kind of like this slow, surreptitious approach. Come on in the house. Don't make any noise. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Well, sure enough, we go into the house. I remember clearly going into his bedroom. There is a revolver stuffed between the box spring and the mattress with a 12 gauge sitting beneath the bed. And I'm just thinking to myself, you freaking idiots. This guy could have dumped you, and you would have never had your gun out
Yeah.
out of the holster.
Yeah.
I was just completely taken aback. And so
Do you think I definitely have an opinion. I'm curious about what yours is. Getting back to the academy, when you're at the academy, I just thought it was run so differently between what DEA and FBI was doing. Do you think that just translated back to the field? Just that they just operate in a different manner.
100%.
Yeah.
They thought we were knuckle draggers, and I remember thinking, you're at the academy, you're co-housed with them. I personally didn't have any interaction with any FBI agents while I was back at the academy.
Yeah.
But I had one experience. It's little things sometimes that really. We're at the range, and I'm back there in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Okay, we got weather, right, from snow to everything in between. You're at the range. The whole, my whole BA class is there at the range, and here come the khakis and the polo shirts.
Yeah.
And they come marching by. They're going to go down a bay or two. Well, under their arms is a canvas, a rolled up canvas throw. And we're all just sitting there looking at them. And I remember our firearms instructor keying in what we're focused on, because it was a shitty day with shitty weather. And he's like, "What the fuck are you looking at? Get on the ground." And basically, just reading you the riot act.
Yeah.
Like, "You freaking losers, get down there and start shooting when I tell you to shoot, and you're not getting one of those, so don't even think about it."
It
Right?
was just a totally different atmosphere.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
it was
was.
like we were kind of a militaristic
Yeah,
whatever, and they were in college. I mean, it
yeah.
was just interesting.
And quite frankly, it 100% appealed to me. Again,
Yeah.
I like the down and dirty part of it.
Yeah.
It just reaffirmed my decision, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Before we start talking about the task force time, you did a little bit of the one group did a little bit of maritime activity.
Yeah.
So what'd you do? Explain that.
It was more respond down to the harbor.
Mhm.
Hey, got this fishing vessel
Yeah.
tied up, got whatever 6 bodies. We need to transfer all this dope to you. And basically, they're not getting involved with taking bodies to MCC. So it was an adoption, in short, but all the investigative part was on us if there was follow-up to do. But quite frankly, being a junior person, that bone's not getting thrown to me.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're talking about cases that basically you were adopting from Coast Guard and Navy, and I mean, is it several thousand kilos and
Well,
stuff
just
like
remember
that?
something. San Diego is the first port
Right.
from any part south from the Pacific. So if they interdict anything, San Diego is going to be the first stop if they're going to bring bodies and evidence.
Right.
So I'm not saying it happened every day, but their seizures were legit seizures,
Yeah,
right?
but was
Big stuff.
it an eye opener as a young
Oh yeah, I
agent
mean,
going, "Holy crap,
you're
look."
looking at hundreds of kilos of
Yeah.
cocaine, right? And you're just like, "Holy shit, this is like the mother lode,"
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it was. I
Yeah.
mean, in the big picture, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay, so now get into you transferred to the task force. You're there for basically, well, almost to the end. Well, you are there except for the very end of your career. You're there for 19 years. Um, what are you working on?
Everything. I mean, we spent so much time on the street. I mean, Link can tell you, you were on the street so often. There was so much action.
Yeah, so
And it could be anywhere from ounces to pounds to kilos.
so as a task force, I always found it. I mean, just you were into everything, right? So tell me what the difference is between working a regular enforcement group with DEA and then going to a task force.
Probably what I would kind of, not 100% describe it as, much faster pace, smaller cases, smaller seizures, short term versus long term.
Mm-hmm.
But what you made of your case was up to you. You have to remember, nobody's telling you you need to walk this through the DA's office or you need to walk this through the U.S. Attorney's office. That's your decision.
Yeah.
So when me, as the agent, is developing my cases, that was my choice.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to spend more time developing my case and making a better case out of it so that I could take my case to the U.S. Attorney's office, that was my choice. Very few of the locals that I worked with, that appealed to them because the U.S. Attorney's office was so difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Hey, they could go over to the DA's office. They were treated like people. They weren't looked down upon or, I had a couple guys that would local cops that would deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I was fortunate to work with an El Cajon PD cop that was he ended up spending 10 years on our team, which that was the only time his agency ever let somebody. But he was a phenomenal cop,
Yeah.
phenomenal cop, and I got to work with him on quite a few cases that were, I mean, great seizures.
But as far as your career, I mean, you got to think for the reason you got into the job, a task force is probably heaven for you.
It was.
Yeah.
We were, I mean, who wants to sit behind a desk?
Right.
And, I mean, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
Who wants to sit behind a desk? We can be out there.
No, that's
kicking ass, taking names.
That's the whole reason to do the job. I don't
Yeah.
want to sit at a desk. I don't
Yeah.
want to, you know.
And I didn't promote because I
Right.
never wanted to sit behind a desk. I didn't want to put on a shirt and a tie.
Uh-huh.
That was the absolute last thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
The street was it for me.
Right. So when you're in that group, you've got a little bit, and I'm going to talk to you about this because I haven't had anybody to talk with about this specific thing. You've got a little bit of emphasis. You start doing a little bit of marijuana ERAD down in San Diego. Tell me about how those cases are. Who's running those? Who's running those marijuana grows? What kind of land is it on? Stuff like that.
So basically, Steve Reed had a pretty phenomenal eye as a spotter. I mean, I remember Steve having blow up photos of G-Land. Okay. This is open real estate.
Yeah.
So you're looking at this photo and it's green. And he said, tell me where the weed is in there. And I remember looking at it, studying this, 8x10, whatever it was. I'm like, I don't see it. It's right there, Derek. It's right there. You see it? And I'm like, okay, right? But Steve would go and he would fly for days and weeks. And then, GPS cords, whatever. And he'd file all these, right? And then it was when he decided it was time to start picking off grows, that's what we did.
Yeah.
And, it was always rural. You had, hour and a half drive to get to some bumfuck place. You'd rally up with everybody that was going out to pick, and it was hump in, whack and stack. If you're lucky, because unfortunately DEA did not allow sling loads. They would not allow our air wing to sling loads.
Okay. Yeah. The DEA. Did you ever have any private contractors come in and sling load
No.
for you though?
SO slung everything for us.
SO is
Sheriff's Department.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Steve's an SO. He works for the Sheriff's Department.
Yeah.
They have no problem slinging
Okay.
loads.
Okay.
So we used their air wing 100%. However, fuel costs and things like that.
Yeah.
There was times when, you're hauling bundles of weed freaking forever. That's like dragging dead bodies.
Yeah, that's interesting that you guys were doing it that way because we would hire private contractors to sling load our stuff out because
Okay.
it took so much less time.
The only exception to that was sometimes we had National Guard.
Yeah,
that would help out.
that's true. That's true. How about this though? In terms of the grows, what was the percentage of Mexican cartels doing your
100%.
100%?
As I say, no white guy's going to do all that work. I mean,
I always said this: if those guys put their effort into legal business, they'd rule the world.
Yeah,
absolutely rule the world.
No, I remember this was the largest grow I ever went into. Were you on this grow link up on Palomar? So, brief for this. Hey, there's a big grow. We meet at a neutral site. We pile into a, pack deep bodies into like 3 trucks. We drive up to the top of Mount Palomar, up near the observatory up there. And it's like pre-dawn, whatever, 4:30 in the morning. We got to freaking get into this grow. So Steve has this spot because we didn't have necessarily this luxury. Seemed to be more the exception than rule, where they could identify an actual a route in and out of a grow.
Mm-hmm.
We tended more to basically break brush, and that's what made it so nasty.
Yeah.
Thick vegetation, and you are just, trying to get in there. You're trying to not only get in there, but not make noise, because if there's bodies in there, you want to have the element of surprise and maybe bag a body or two, right? Not just end up with plants.
Yeah.
So we had to come down the mountain, and we came down basically, I don't know if it was a creek bed, but it definitely indicated there had been traffic on this. And it was so steep that you couldn't help but slide a portion of the way as we're coming in. And, rocks are getting kicked up, and, we're trying to keep the noise down. And we finally come into this grow. And the first thing that came to mind was looking down. I'm sure it was a spring-fed creek, and they had pooled the water, and were just dumping bags of chemical fertilizer into this natural stream bed for their plant fertilization. So it's getting 100% contaminated, polluted for plant, wildlife, and everything else in
Yeah, so
between.
talk about that a little bit, Derek, because most people will just think, it's marijuana. And then they also don't realize 99% of all the marijuana ERAD that we're doing, DEA is doing, is all on public lands. It's either BLM land, U.S. Forest Service land,
County,
everything, right?
yeah.
But talk about the environmental impact that those marijuana growers are having, because you're talking about exactly what they're dealing with now is all these chemicals are getting dumped in the water, and now it's the groundwater starting to test positive for this crap.
I just remember, I'm a nature guy,
Yeah.
and just looking at that and just hit me, God, this is just so wrong.
Yeah.
So wrong. Like zero regard for, for nature, and for anything and everything else. No regard.
Yeah, because I'm sure you're seeing the same thing that we were seeing in Idaho and Washington, which is you're going into these places and these guys are living there for months, and you're seeing piles of freaking trash and all.
Just remember something: supplies come in, nothing leaves. The only thing that leaves is the weed,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
They're not humping that out.
Yep.
And it just turns into a dump site.
Yeah. So you got the garbage, you have the propane tanks, you have the plastic tubing, you have everything that gets left up there. And so when
And
people
and it was unfortunate, that I think possibly in other parts of the country, maybe Forest Service or, maybe Fish and Game, whoever. Um, I've heard that they were more involved in actually cleaning up sites.
Mhm.
We would occasionally net out stuff
Mhm.
when we're, at the end after we slung all our dope out.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd net up supply, but it never was everything.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
It was more of a small percentage what came out than what was physically there.
Oh. Hmm.
So I remember walking into this grow and looking, and because it was Mount Palomar, it was more forested. Was not so much of this low canopy. And I remember looking around to a sea of lime green, and I'm like, this looks like frickin' Vietnam. It was beautiful. Beautiful. Just a sea of lime green.
Yeah.
So Steve says, we're going to lay in and see if anything pops up. So he selects me and another guy, Mark DeVito, and he puts us where there's this defined trailhead coming up, and it's coming from a low point up over a knoll into this one grow area. So we lay in, and we're laying in, and everybody's actually spread out and back behind us. And I remember laying there, and I had taken my eyes off for it seemed like a split second, and my eyes came back, and I'm like looking straight, and I'm proned out, but it's like you see this guy, this Mexican, and he's looking at me like just dead, and he's frozen. And nobody's saying anything, nobody's doing anything, and all of a sudden he goes, and freaking all you hear is he is running literally busting brush, boulders rolling, branches breaking, and he's 100 miles an hour. I'm out of here, right?
Yeah.
And
Did you catch him?
no,
No. No, because those guys are living up there. They're fantastic.
you're not doing what
Yeah.
he's doing.
Yeah.
You're sacrificing all form of safety at that point.
Exactly.
And his buddy must have heard him because his buddy split at the same. You just hear the roar through the forest,
Yeah.
right? So that grow, Steve estimated that there was about 100,000 plants,
Now that's a good one.
and it took us 2 full days because what would happen is we would clear an area that was planted, and all of a sudden you go down a trail for 5 minutes, and all of a sudden, boom, you're into another pocket,
Yep.
and then down a trail, and boom, you're into another pocket, and then it went from this is beautiful to this is never going to end.
Yeah.
Never going to end.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest grow I think I ever was in, and we had some different experiences. I mean, they always seemed to turn into something that was like, wow,
Yeah.
almost died, or something crazy went down to people are out of water.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are always fun.
And it's like you're calling in for help because like people have gone dry and you're miles out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so toward the end of your career, you go in and you decide to be promoted. GS, well, okay. So not decide.
Acting.
Tell me why you end up becoming the GS of Tech Ops. Well, and first of all, before you answer that, what is Tech Ops for people who have no idea what
Tech Ops is our technical operations unit.
Okay.
And basically you have a combination of both agents and then non-sworn working in there.
Okay.
And they're responsible. I mean, it's actually a very diverse responsibility, from installing covert cameras to pull cams to downloading audio and visual recordings, supplying undercover vehicles that are set up for that, wiring vehicles. Link had developed just a very incredibly well outfitted shop for the years that he had spent
Just
in there.
super important group for supporting the agents in the field.
Correct.
I mean, you just can't do
because the agents need this ability to, in theory, produce a quality case. I mean, what prosecutor doesn't want to see video and audio of a crook telling you what they're going to deliver you and actually doing it?
Right.
And then you have cases where people, because of the location, you cannot do actual hands-on surveillance, so you have to rely on electronic surveillance, and that might be a covert camera, or it might be a light camera. It could be a vehicle with an undercover vehicle that's actually outfitted with recording equipment that you drop and remotely actuate recording equipment, or let it run for a period of time.
Yeah.
And maybe building something custom for that. And that's not, we had thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of equipment in there, different types of visual and audio recording equipment for just about any situation, James Bond stuff.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, without a good tech agent, without a good tech group, I mean, it makes all the difference in the world. Because not only for the attorneys, but for their jury, if it ever goes to so
they all want to see it.
Okay, so you've gone through your whole entire career, never wanted to get promoted. What happens?
I'm working in the task force. The team that I'd spent almost all my time on. I somehow managed not only to stay in the task force for an incredibly long period of time, which DEA typically didn't allow. And I remember my El Cajon cop partner saying to me, "Goes Derek, what do you have on the ASAC that's he's letting you stay in here? You like pictures of him fucking a goat, or you know?" And I'm just like, "Hey, I do my job. I try and make my ASAC happy. Apparently, they're happy with my performance because nobody's telling me I got to leave." So, and by that time, I'd spent so many years, I did not want to go back.
Yeah.
I did not want to go. I had experienced, you know, an all DEA group um, atmosphere, and I preferred what I was doing. I preferred that the action
Yeah.
and the the pace
Yeah.
and everything. Now, there's a price to pay for that, and we can say you worked a lot of hours. We worked a lot of hours. There was a lot of overtime. And if you weren't into that, wasn't the place for you.
Right.
Not only that, but you had to be able to get along with a diverse law enforcement um, representation there, because we had literally representation from every federal, state, and local agency in San Diego County was on our task force.
Yeah.
It was a big task force and lots of teams, and some were specialized. We had an airport team. We had you know team that also did packages and different types of transportation, not just airport, but say train and you know um, Greyhound bus, all that interdiction type of work. And
Yeah.
so there was a lot of diversity there. Um, so my current I had always had a very good working relationship, not only just with the sergeants, since I was on the team I was on was an sheriff's run team. So we're housed within DEA, but we had representation because of the amount of bodies these agencies sent. Sheriff's Department, San Diego PD both sent a lot of people down to our task force. So with that came sergeants and lieutenants housed and working within our office. So everything was under the DEA umbrella. All paperwork, everything, all seizures, everything was under DEA within our office. Some of the pluses with that for these agencies was the experience, not only since they had representation at our office, but if those particular agencies had a problem within their jurisdiction and it was dope related, task force got called. Hey, El Cajon PD just got a call. Apartment burned and there's a lab in it, active lab. Boom, you're rolling. So that those different agencies got assistance in handling their criminal activity, dope related.
Yeah.
Um, I ended up having a very good over this time, a very good working relationship with my sergeants and my lieutenants, aside from my ASAC, and was always very happy um, with who I worked with and worked around. And we eventually got a sergeant in that was problematic, and he wasn't above board. First time in all of my law enforcement career where I saw somebody doing shady stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a couple meetings with him about it prior to actually basically ramping this up. It wasn't freaking hitting home.
Mm.
And we'd be out doing enforcement, and it's like, what the hell are you doing? Can't do that. And it's kind of like, so I went to my ASAC finally. I'm a senior guy. Hey, got problems. And he wasn't doing his job.
Yeah.
He wasn't dealing with it. So Link said, I'm punching out. Want to come over to tech? You can kiss the problem part away and
Yeah.
walked away from that. So he paved the road. I went over to tech.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate. I had a couple situations like that, and I would say 2 out of the 3 of them got handled pretty decently,
Hmm.
but one of them didn't get handled at all. And it's like, if you're going to report a problem, expect the supervisors or expect somebody to do something. And so when it doesn't happen, it becomes very frustrating.
Well, as I see it, that is management's job.
100%.
That is their job,
Yep.
in part.
Yep.
That's their responsibility. And when you have a boss telling you, I need you to do this and I need you to do that, and smooth this over or report this back to me, and then you know I'm like, this isn't my job.
Yeah.
I'm telling you there's a problem. I'm
Right.
giving you specific details
Yep.
about stuff going on.
Yep.
Okay, you got a home run here. Is it no brainer? Handle it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was the first and only time I ever had to go down that road in all my law enforcement career. And fortunately, it was at the tail end of my job. So it didn't sour me for all those years. I didn't have that negative experience.
Yeah, because we talked about this beforehand as well. I mean, you look back on your career and I think you can say you had what 95% of your career was great,
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
they're very fortunate. Okay, so let me ask you two final questions I always ask. One, did being in law enforcement um, affect your family? So I know you talked about in the beginning just going, "Hey, I'm doing this," but then you also mentioned all the long hours.
Yeah.
So how did that affect your family?
We went from the early days of having a pager to transitioning into the days of having a cell phone. And, your cell phone always and your pager went off in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
It's just the way it was.
yeah,
She never sweated me.
hmm,
You know, she knew shit hit the fan, things were going down, and I'm out the door. See ya.
yeah.
I'll
Huh.
call you when I can.
How about this? Can you go back to the beginning of your career to now even? Do you think law enforcement affected the way that you see people and see society?
I remember having a conversation with my mom at one point. We're dealing with dispensaries, weed weed issues. This was Weed was still illegal at the local level, and I'm involved in addressing some of, um, I guess, more on the retail level.
Mm-hmm.
And a neighbor of my parents actually was growing and involved Steve McWilliams, um, and he was on the forefront in San Diego of trying to push legalization. He was a true believer. Okay. And I remember having a conversation with my mom. I said, "You have no idea when you're standing in the grocery store with the person in front of you, the person behind you, they can seem like regular people and nice people, but you have no idea what people can be like until you actually experience it from our level. And you see through working, targeting people for days, weeks, and months at a time, how their life is, and you're following them around and you're seeing, you know, their day-to-day interaction, and they're mixing with public and everything else.
Yeah.
And people have no idea. Hey, this guy is a complete shitbag criminal, you know,
Yeah.
no regard for anything or anybody. And this guy, Steve McWilliams, walked by the sidewalk. He's walking his dogs, lived probably 3 blocks away from my mom. And I looked at her and I said, that guy's my target. And she looked at me and she's like, what? I'm like, yeah. I ended up hooking that guy, and eventually, and um, it was a politically charged case, and he spent a short amount of time, got bailed out, but Steve had to piss test while he was out on federal probation, and he ended up killing himself because he couldn't smoke weed.
Hmm.
That's how much of a true believer he was.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you do you think yourself right now as jaded?
No, realistic.
It's interesting. I've had a couple people say that exact thing. Not jaded, just realistic about how things really are.
In a nutshell, what the general public doesn't know to them doesn't exist.
Right.
It does not exist. Reality is based on fact. And we know the factual basis behind law enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does jade you because you have to remember something. You're around bad people all the time. So you're always impacted by the negative side of society because everybody you're dealing with is a bad person.
But being retired now, do you go out to your local town and do you look around and go, that dude's a shithead, that guy's okay? Do you do that? Are you jaded in that way, or no? Since you've been retired, that's kind of gone down a little bit.
It's gone down. It's interesting. My daughter was in her last semester at college, and she did a study abroad program. And my wife and her decided uh, we were gonna. They're gonna. I was up here, and I got told about this planned trip while I was up here. So we're gonna go down to Peru, and we were gonna hike Machu Picchu, spend a little time in Peru, and then my wife had booked her and I a very small outing on the Galapagos, and my daughter was then going to go off and do her program, study abroad. And I remember I was good in Peru. Okay, this is my first time being in South America. Been to Mexico, spent plenty of time in Mexico, was okay with it, but my experience in Mexico was all personal, camping,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And we got to Ecuador, and I immediately, hair went up on the back of my neck. And I'm like, I don't feel good. I didn't want people behind me. I didn't want people standing behind me to the side. It was just a sixth sense that I didn't feel in Peru.
Yeah.
But 100% felt it in Ecuador.
Huh.
So that stays with you. Being able to come to a place like this puts you at ease.
Yeah. Yeah.
It separates you from that
Yeah.
part of life.